This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Badgers will look to bounce back tonight at the Kohl Center after blowing a double-digit lead in the second half to Oregon on Saturday. They'll tip off against Washington tonight at 8 o'clock. The Huskies are currently last in the Big Ten. Wisconsin's chances at a Big Ten title are slim after Saturday's loss, but they are still projected as a 3 seed for the tournament. Next up, they'll get ready to go to East Lansing on Sunday for a battle against the 8th-ranked Spartans. Turning to the Brewers, who are just about to begin their fourth Cactus League game, the team's number one pitching prospect, Jacob Misiorowski, will get the start today. Pat Murphy talked about what he's telling his young players at camp.
I love seeing young players hungry and want to play in the big leagues and never have. This is the organization of opportunity. So you're going to get that chance. And we're going to try to win, too, by the way. We're not just going to show up and give you the chance and fill a roster. We're going to try to win.
The Brewers will open the regular season at home on March 31st against the Royals.
ABC of Wisconsin is the largest apprenticeship program in the state, with more than 2,000 active apprentices in 12 different skilled trades. In the ABC apprenticeship program, you earn while you learn on the job, get paid to go to class, and graduate with a job in your craft, but without the huge college debt. Explore 12 different construction trades in one spot at buildyourcareerwi.org or just search online for ABC of Wisconsin.
Well, the Bucks will look for their 5th straight victory and 4 in a row since the All-Star break tonight in Houston against the Rockets. Milwaukee is currently tied for 4th place in the Eastern Conference with the Pacers. Tip-off tonight is at 7. And lastly, the NFL Combine will be held this weekend beginning on Thursday. The Packers are slated to pick 23rd on draft night in Green Bay. For the Wisconsin Sports Zone Network, I'm Austin Harper.
How do you view your spot in the pack?
Well, that depends how you chop up the top teams, right, Bill? You kind of left a couple other ones out that we might have won. But I mean, we've talked about this before. Last year I was here and you guys were taught how we're going to catch the San Francisco 49ers. This year I'm sure it'll be the Eagles. It changes, right? And we got to concentrate on us and be the best we can be. I know that if with the group that we have now, we'll add to it. If we do that, when we hold our standards high, then I think all those things, will be attainable for us. All the goals we have.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
So Brian Gutekunst did 2 media avails at the Combine, talked with the local media, talked with the national media. And the way I understand it, that's every year. He does one with the, friendly faces of the Green Bay and the Packers beat, and then he does the podium for all of the network people and the TV stations. And there's a lot of comments from both the local and the national that I think are worth picking over. I picked 4 or 5 of them that we're going to kind of circle around and talk about throughout the course of the show. That comment to me, that question and answer, the question from Bill Huber, and it was, hey, you had a nice season, but you couldn't beat the elite teams. And of course, you were eliminated by Philly. So how do you get on the level of those elite teams? How do you get on the level of Philly? And Goody's answer was, well, I think you left out, some other teams, some of the games that we won. And I think the Packers had a fine season. I think in some ways they took a nice step from year 1 to year 2 with Jordan Love. I think they regressed in some other areas. And I don't know that they beat an elite team. They beat the Rams on the road. Okay, but they were really banged up. They beat the Texans, which was a nice win, but it's not like they looked awesome doing it. And I don't know that the Texans by the end of the year showed to be an elite team. They were a fine team. But it was that comment in there. That's what really stuck with me. And I think that's what drives at the current state of the Packers. That's what hits home for where we are right now as Packers fans saying, well, last year was San Francisco. Now you're going to ask me about the Eagles. Yes, that's the point. Because year after year after year, and this goes back, pre-Jordan Love into the Aaron Rodgers era. If it's not the Niners, then it's the Cardinals. If it's not the Cardinals, it's the Seahawks. If it's not the Seahawks, it's the Falcons, or it's the Niners again, or it's the Bucks, or last year it was the Niners, and now it's the Eagle. Yes, Goody, that is the point. Not necessarily who the team is, but that really since 2010, there's always been a team or two that have been slightly better than you. The question and the idea of how do we notch it up just a little bit? How do we just kick it in the pants a little bit to get on that final level? I don't care what the team is. Well, last year was the Niners. Now it's the Eagles. Take away the team, Brian. There's always 1 or 2 teams above you. And I think Packers fans this offseason, encouraged by Gutekunst's comments in his end of year presser saying, now it's time we go for championships. How do we get from where we are now to just the slightly higher level of fill in the blank team? It's not who the team is, it's that there always seems to be another team. And that is true again this year. And that's why that comment from Goody, that's why I put it in the intro. That's the big picture comment that I think drives at the state of the Packers going into the combine, free agency, and the draft. We can talk logistics. He talked about Jair, and he reacted to Josh Jacobs' comment. Really good nuts and bolts from Brian Gutekunst today, but that was the big picture thing that really stuck with me, and we talked about that on Bill's show earlier today, too. My name is Grant Bills. It's the Wisco Sports Show. Welcome. Really fun show tonight. I think it's going to be great. A lot of good Packers points, and we can use Brian Gutekunst's words to kind of kick off those points. I want to talk a little bit about the Brewers and a special guest who was on the show probably pre-pandemic, but has not been back on since. I will tell you about that coming up in a bit. But right now, live from the Combine, bright and early to begin the show. I know it's probably not bright and early for that means 4 o'clock, but for the purpose of this show, bright and early. Mike Clemens is here. He's been down at the Combine. He was on Bill's show earlier today. Mike, are you bumping elbows with important people and seeing all the names and the faces of the decision makers and the big timers with the NFL down there?
Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Nick Sirianni,
Bill Michaels. That's a big deal too.
And I was on the Bill Michaels show. I mean, on and on and on, saying hi to friends, in the media, like Andrew Siciliano, used to be on NFL Network, on and on. Let me tell you, Grant, in my notes, I wrote down over 55 questions in the 1-hour session that Brian Gutekunst did here in Indianapolis this morning at a, undisclosed location, their team hotel kind of down the street from the convention center. And out of all those, you probably picked the best cut. You really hit the nail on the head there.
Yes.
Because I thought that was a way that he really did put a focus. Like, Jesus, a year ago, you guys were saying, what are you going to do to beat the 49ers? And then now you're saying, well, what are you going to have to do to beat the champion Philadelphia Eagles? And it's like, at the end of the day, you got to stop chasing other teams.
Yes.
You have to just look at yourself and build the best team that you can. Now, I will tell you that after, and if you want a quick little history, here's how this thing has grown over the years. First of all, the Combine happened in the 80s. A guy named Gil Brandt, who was born in Milwaukee and became roommates, I think, in college of Crazy Legs, Elroy Hirsch, up in Wisconsin. And then Elroy went to the Rams in the 50s as a wide receiver and as a GM type guy. And Gil Brandt worked for the Rams and then the Cowboys during the Tom Landry days. And in the 80s, Gil, probably in his 50s then, said, why do we fly all around the country to do these physicals? Let's just all meet in a central location. So a guy from Wisconsin, a tremendous scout, came up with the idea for the Combine. And so during Ron Wolf's time, and certainly with Ted Thompson's time, they do about 4 or 5 required by the NFL press conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And as things moved on, after the Mike Holmgren era, and when Ted took over, and after 1 year with Mike Sherman, they really started to tighten. You couldn't stand on the sidelines and talk to scouts anymore. And you couldn't talk to the vice president of pro personnel or any.
Yeah.
You couldn't talk to Andrew Brandt anymore. Ted clamped that down, as did all other teams. So in terms of the media, Ted might have lunch with just the writers, just the newspaper writers, maybe a magazine guy up in Green Bay. And then when they get down here for the Combine, he would do the national media podium like you see on the NFL Network. And then when they get done with that, they come down from the podium. They do what they call a sidebar, just like in a courthouse. And they'll talk to maybe the local guys or anybody else that wants to listen in. I listened into the Bills GM for a little bit this afternoon. But from a standpoint of they don't want to deal with crackpots or podcasters asking, left field questions.
Yeah.
And also it had to do with when we had to do Zooms for about 1.5 years during COVID, like everybody's business changed during COVID. The format now is this. Brian, his people, the PR people from the staff, you get a text and say, meet us in this room first thing Tuesday morning at this hour. And there's some coffee and, refreshments. And we talk, they close the door and we talk for an hour in a conference room. Then he lets in the broadcast people. And that's the part that I was able to share with you today. And that's the local TV people you see, radio people, and some of the newspaper guys asking those questions. Then he goes across the street over into the big convention center where the combine's being held, takes 15 minutes of questions from the national media, and then unless he does like Florio or NFL Network or something like that, he's done. He is done for the week for media, unless you hang out and maybe you can catch him in the hallway and walk with him for a while and that kind of thing. But he's now into this full schedule, trying to talk to 20 or plus players a day, maybe talk to some coaches, network with guys, over dinner about what's going on in the league, or with old friends and find out what they say. So with that session today, yeah, it started with that. And some of the top topics, one of the things I want to know about is injured players. So Christian Watson, the knee injury, suffered, in that last game, that loss to the Bears. And by the way, Gutekunst also, besides pointing out what you said, hey, we beat some pretty good teams, he also a number of times said, we lost our last 3 games. All right? And that's right. They lost the last 3 games of the season. They did not end on a high note. And then, of course, a 22-10 loss in Philadelphia against the Eagles. But, Christian Watson has had his surgery, and it didn't seem as if there were any other complications in the surgery. And he said, he knows what's ahead of him now for the rehab. He's been through this before. And I'm assuming he's talking about when they cleaned up the knee the rookie year. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And he missed some time? Yeah. So he talked about that. Romeo Doubs, he does not feel as a concussion-prone player, even though he had 2 of them last year. It all happened in the same era. I asked him about Elton Jenkins because after the game in Philadelphia, I told you guys on the air, man, that shot that he took, helmet to shoulder pad, and his arm just went limp. And guys were helping him take his shirt off in the locker room after the game. And on his way to I said, was that just a stinger? He goes, yeah, it was bad, but he's okay now. He'll be okay. Jaden Reed, who dislocated his shoulder, the top, receiver, number 11, and your punt returner, may miss some of the OTAs, according to Brian Gutekunst today.
So really good housekeeping update. I thought the Dobbs thing was important, right? They don't believe him to be a concussion-prone player. Watson as well, and some of the injuries, housekeeping type of things, and I appreciate that update. The combine, and you tell me this, Mike, I've heard some more national folks talking about this, people who've worked in the league or worked as scouts even. The combine is a place where all these general managers, all these scouts, these coaches, not all the coaches, but a lot of people are all together. Is this a week where deals get done, right? Where trades are discussed and a week or 2 from now, maybe we learn that a player has been traded and then you read the story, the expose on how this trade came to be. And it's like, well, and they started discussions at the combine in a conference room or over dinner, at St. Elmo's having a steak, right? This week could be a genesis point, or it's talked about as a genesis point for maybe some big trades or some players that might hit the market in free agency. This is where a lot of that decision-making is discussed and could maybe begin, right, Mike?
Sure.
Okay.
Because your scouting department, Gutekunst's, personnel guys, they've been assigned to watch the college tape, to watch the NFL games. You got your pro personnel guy and your director of college scouting, John Eric Sullivan, who's going to remain with the Packers for now. He didn't get the Jaguars GM job. And then you start preparing for Combine Week, and you're starting to get your list. Now they know who the top free agents are, and they look across their boards to what they feel their needs are going to be, and maybe some players that they think that they're going to get outpriced in the market. They may not pay that much for Josh Myers at center. So, what are some options if we need to fill that? So that's all laid out so that when you come here now, you know what your needs are, you know who you like in terms of players or maybe even coaches, and then you start nosing around and negotiating. I mean, I just got done talking to Sean Payton from the Broncos, who said because he's lost so many. I forgot how. Aaron Glenn, the new head coach of the Jets that left the Lions as defensive coordinator, he's a Sean Payton tree guy from the Saints.
Yeah.
As well as Dennis Allen,
Dan
or
Campbell
Ben
as well.
Dan Campbell from the Lions is a Sean Payton tree guy. Ben Johnson, apparently, I forgot that he had some time with Sean Payton. So when you talk to Sean Payton, Guys are talking to him. He met with Dan Campbell an hour and a half before he did his press conference today because Dan Campbell wanted to ask him about some guys that they've worked with together when Dan was working for Sean and the Saints. And now Dan has, he lost both his offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, and he's looking to hire guys who maybe have worked with those two in the past and know the way they like to set up their programs. So, yeah, there's a lot of that networking that goes on, and it's pretty important to them.
Well, and you can, if maybe not working over a trade, like let's say for Myles Garrett, because he's the player that everyone's talking about right now because he's requested a trade. Let's scale it back even from discussing, hey, we give you 2 first-rounders, you give us that, right, a huge type of trade. It could even be something as simple as, well, I used to coach with this guy here. We're still buddies, even though he's in Miami and I'm in Denver, but the Dolphins might be letting this guy walk in free agency. And I'm just going to ask, why is that? Is it a money thing? Is it a scheme thing? Right? Just information gathering. So these decision makers, these coaches, and these scouts can best equip themselves to make decisions when free agency opens here in just a couple weeks, or obviously when the draft rolls around, if there's picks that are traded around, or maybe, a guy in the NFL coached a guy in college years ago, or he knows that, right? Everybody knows everybody in this world. And now that they're all in the same place in Indy, all of these conversations can be had that really set the stage for the next 2 months or so.
Well, I can tell you, when Gutekunst walked into this conference from about a minute before 8 o'clock this morning here in Indianapolis and pulled up a chair, and there's about 12 of us, writers and your radio boy here sitting around waiting for him to come, and he sits down, next to me. He gets out his cell phone and turns on its audio recorder and says, here, I got to do this just in case I get fined. Which means, I may start rambling. I may make a suggestion that we've talked about a certain player or a certain team. And if any of you knuckleheads misquote me and that gets out and the league fines me for tampering, I've got my own copy right here that says, no, here's what I told them, So there's, that's what the job entails.
Well, now. Who else used to do that, Mike? Probably still does it. Wasn't Aaron Rodgers notorious for that in certain settings? He wanted to have a record of the interview for himself as well.
Yeah, and the last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl before that, I can't remember the receiver now off the top of my head. He was kind of a weird dude. But I sat down on the one-on-one with him, and he said, oh, hang on a second. And he hit record on his Go camera. So we had a 2-shot of us.
Was it Alshon Jeffrey back in 2018?
Yes, that's who it was.
Interesting.
That's who it was. Yeah, because he was just a weird dude that way, Okay, whatever. Maybe he's been burnt before.
Sure.
By God, he wasn't going to have, some bulletin board material get out there in the Super Bowl that they're going to, blame on him on something that he said. But yeah, it's not only do you get a chance to, talk to Brian about all the Packers issues, but today, talking to Dan Campbell, talking to Sean Payton, who had a great analogy about this time of the year for him in Denver with the Broncos and Bo Nix moving on as his new quarterback. And he said, after our last game, man, it's really like a board game. You shake the board, all the pieces go flying, and then you set the board down and you have to start, set the board up all from scratch. The starting points, who your token's going to be, what places do you need? Where do you start building? Just like a game of Monopoly, that's what a football season feels like every year in terms of rebuilding that roster. Yeah. Here's an interesting thing. Here's the bottom line is this. What's my top story out of this today for Green Bay Packer fans? Because a year ago at this time, a guy said to me, hey, remember Chris? He used to cover the Vikings. Well, he's not out in Denver covering the Broncos.
Chris Thomason.
Yeah. Okay. So we are at lunch and Chris says, so how was it with your guy? Oh, yeah, Brian Gutekunst. Yeah, we met this morning about a 1-hour conference. They served some Starbucks. We talked about this. Yeah, it's just kind of like this, but most of it's supposed to be background for us. So we know where things are going to be headed between now and free agency in March and the draft in Green Bay after that. And I said, how was it with your guy? And he says, fine. Sean met us at this one restaurant. We got there about 6, had a lovely dinner and a chat. And then the one other guy said, ask him how long. I said, how long did it go last night? 6 hours.
Holy balls.
What? 6 hours. Sean Payton talked to this group of reporters from Denver for 6 hours. You know why? He was cleaning up after the 1 year where he benched Russell Wilson.
Yep.
And why he was going to move Russell Wilson. I saw Gutekunst in the hallway, and I went to him and I said, "Hey, I had some lunch with the guys from the Broncos."
Yep.
And I said, "Sean Payton took those guys out." "No, how long? His meeting last?" "No." I said, 6 hours. His jaw dropped, and he started to laugh. And I said, "Did you guys get it up for me?" I said, "Oh, no, fine. There's no way I want to sit and talk to you for 6 hours. You know, I mean, come on, man, let's get real."
I don't want to talk to anyone for 6 hours. Oh, my God.
He shrugged his shoulders, and he looked at me, and he said, "You know, all we've got to do is sign Jordan, and that's it."
Yep.
So a year ago at this time, that was really at the top of his agenda. I've got to sign the quarterback, and I'm going to this $250 million, contract waters that everybody's going to be paying their quarterbacks, 4 or 5 of them and all that. And he also was open, and it wasn't hard to see. He needed to address safety, and he needed to figure out what he's going to do at running back with Aaron Jones. And then we saw how that all played out. They had that all planned. They tried to do the best they could. But when that free agency day starts, it is no different than the draft.
Yep.
What are the other offers around? And so for me, I think the biggest thing is, and then you have to decide, is it do we add an edge rusher, or is the decision already made on what's going to happen to Jair Alexander at corner?
Yeah. Things like that. Well, and he talked about that today. We'll get to that. Yeah.
And that'll be, that will be the big story then for the Packers out of this combine. What's the number one thing on their to-do list between now and free agency in mid-March and the draft? By the way, he said Mark Murphy came to him jokingly, but serious, would say, "Hey, man, if you need to trade down out of the first round, even though the draft's here in Green Bay, go ahead. Don't worry about it. Do what you got to do."
Gave him
or if you want to trade away that draft pick, yeah. So they had a kind of a good laugh like that. No, don't think that, well, they've got to have a player across the stage when they hosted the draft. Now, Mark Murphy could care less.
Yeah, they don't. He's got other things to worry about. We got to get this tush push out of the game, which I agree with, and that's kind of a fun side story. But thank you, Mike, for the housekeeping details about what Goody said today, things to watch and things to think about and talk about moving forward as this week continues. Enjoy your time down there. Go get a steak with Bill or some Skyline chili or something tonight.
Sounds good. Thank you, Grant. Appreciate it, pal.
No, thank you, Mike. That's Mike Clemens down in Indianapolis at the Combine. And I know if you're watching on the live stream, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, it said live in Green Bay. I didn't want to make another picture. You get the point. He's where the Packers are. And that's in Indianapolis this week for the Combine. A couple of comments from Brian Gutekunst. We can get into what he talked about, some of those housekeeping things. Jair, Josh Jacobs comments. We can get into that. And, a little bit of follow-up to his comment a few months ago of it's time to win championships. You'll hear from Goody next, and we can react together.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
So how do you view your spot in the pack?
Well, that depends how you chop up the top teams, right, Bill? You kind of left a couple other ones out that we might have won. But I mean, we've talked about this before. Last year I was here and you guys were talking how we're going to catch the San Francisco 49ers. This year I'm sure it'll be the Eagles. It changes, right? And we got to concentrate on us and be the best we can be. And I know that if with the group that we have now, we'll add to it. If we do that and we hold our standards high, then I think all those things, will be attainable for us. All the goals we have.
It's Brian Gutekunst earlier today. It's Mike Clemens approved, by the way. I began the show by saying that to me is the big picture cut of the day. We can get into the housekeeping of Jair, injuries to guys like Dobbs and Watson, right? Josh Jacobs, talk about number one wide receiver. What do you think there, right? We can get into the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts, and we will. But the big picture comment of the day, that exchange between Bill Huber and Brian Gutekunst, where it's like, well, last year you asked me about the Niners. This year you're asking me about the Eagles, right? Kind of not mocking or not dismissing the question. I don't disagree with Goody's point. It's like, look, we're not building to beat any particular team. We're building our team and focusing on our business to be the best team possible. All right, great. But in that comment, Goody, don't you realize that this is, I think, why Packers fans are starting to press a little bit, is for 15 years now, you've always been the bridesmaid in the NFC, never the bride. And part of that, like 2014, they should have beat Seattle. 2020, they should have beat Tampa. Okay, I don't hang that on team building, but a lot of those years, it's San Francisco, it's Arizona, it's Seattle, it's San Francisco again, right? These teams, Philadelphia, now that you're coming up short against, and we're wondering, okay, forget the team. Don't get bogged down on San Francisco last year, Eagles this year. It's you are constantly second or third fiddle in your own conference. How are you going to find one extra gear or one extra notch that you can kick this thing up? So we're not having the same conversation next year about, man, how do you catch the Commanders, right? Or how do you catch the Lions, or et cetera, et cetera. So that's the cut of the day. The phone calls are lit up. We barely even gotten into the show. Appreciate Mike Clemens for the first segment, but if you're ready, I'll take you. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Denny from Holman.
Denny, good evening. How are you?
How are you, young man?
I am well. How about you, Denny? I know you're plugged into all this combine stuff.
I got one question for you, okay? When you were out, because you're a musician, when you were out in New Orleans, how did it feel when you walked into a bar and you heard those horns? And I mean, that must have been just ecstatic.
It's pretty cool. We need more just groups of horn players walking around 3rd Street in La Crosse or, wherever in Holman. I don't even know if I've ever been to downtown Holman. You probably don't go downtown. It's probably a little lively for you, Denny. You probably stay out in the country.
Oh, yeah, right. A little bit lively. Yeah, you got that right. So I agree with you on Gutekunst, and I believe that if he doesn't hit something in the draft and the Packers don't prevail this year, I think that with the new GM and everything, I think he might just clean house and start all over. I know it's a lot to think about, but I talked to some real dear Packer stock shareholders and stuff, and he said, we all know that the stadium will be filled, okay? We're not going to say that the fans will boycott, but, it's almost to the point where we need to get over this hump that we're in, and we need to do something. And we need to get an Andrew Van Ginkel in the open market, or Bond, I mean, how about those guys? They were all open, and I just feel that, And I hope Love can come through this year too, because that's kind of been a question in a lot of people's mind too. Will we get the number one Love we had the last part of the previous season?
Yeah.
Or will we get this Love that we had this last part that was supposedly hurt?
What kind of Love are we getting? It's a good point, Denny. You gave us a lot to chew on there, Denny, so I'm going to let you go because I'm going to get to some other folks. You are right about the frustration among Packers fans of coming up second or third fiddle. You know what I mean? For a long time with Rodgers, it was losing in the NFC Championship game, losing in the divisional round to that team in the conference is a little bit better than you. And you're not going to be the top dog in the conference every year. It's just not going to work, right? Although they probably should have been the top dog more often when Rodgers was at the peak of his powers, but he had injuries and then they had some fluky losses in the playoffs too. Okay, I get it. You're not going to be dominant. You're not going to be number one every year. We're to the point now, 15 years running, you build a good team, but a couple offseason decisions here and there keep you from being the best team. And this is a question and an answer about the Packers' progress. And I don't know who's asking this, but I'll play this and then we'll get back to the phone calls.
You talked about urgency. How do you, as a GM, approach the offseason when it comes to urgency? Where it's you have to think about the draft, which might be guys that are 3-4 years down the line, and where there's veterans, what everybody the outside the world, the fans want to see when it comes to urgency to go out and sign guys. How do you kind of balance?
Yeah, our process won't change. I think it doesn't really change a lot as we approach free agency and the drafts as far as our, how we're looking at things. I do think that we have a lot of flexibility right now, not only through the draft, but in with our cap situation. So if the opportunities are there and the right players are there, we won't hesitate to be aggressive.
So I heard that and I kind of hoped you would say, yeah, we're looking to get more aggressive. We're doing, I didn't want to hear our process isn't going to change. Because that's the process that's kept him very good, but not great. And I didn't really love those comments based on what he told us at the end of the year. Now we're ready. We have urgency. It's time to start competing for championships. And that means we might have to do one or two things differently relative to previous off seasons. 608-321-1670. We'll take this call here and then take our break, and we'll get just more comments from Brian Gutekunst after the bottom of the hour. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, it's Uncle Packer.
Hey, Uncle Packer. What's going on?
Excited about what Gutekunst is saying and listening intently. Looking forward to the combines. But, I'm going to go on a little different thing. The Packers have kind of stirred up this push-push stuff. And everybody's talking about injury. And you know what's going to happen? I think what might happen if this push-push keeps going, what's going to stop teams from getting a push-push group? Get some big guys, a couple big running backs, get a couple big tight end types, and just go for 3 yards every time up the middle. All you need is 3 yards 4 times in a row, and that's 12 yards. You got a first down. I think it's going to change the game if we keep letting people get pushed from behind. I haven't heard anybody say that. Maybe I'm way off, but now everybody's going to copy that push. And besides the injury, I don't like the way that takes away from the game.
So I don't like the play for a million different reasons. I'm glad you brought this up, Uncle Packer, and I appreciate the call. Because Goody mentioned this today. He was asked about it because the Packers were the team that suggested, or I don't know what the term is, but teams can, nominate a rule, or they can make a suggestion and then the other owners and the other clubs get to vote on it, right? And Nick Sirianni was at the podium today, and what was his quote? I saw Florio had a story on it. Sirianni calls to ban tush push unfair, quote, and a quote, a little insulting. I'm insulted. Forget the player safety. It's not that I don't care about player safety, but you know what I care about? As a fan that watches football, I hate seeing it on my TV. It's not exciting. There's no intrigue to it. There's no suspense. There's no reason for me to not go to the kitchen to get a snack, to not go to the bathroom to take a leak. Like, I hate it. It's a rugby play. Get it out of the game. It's completely independent to whether or not the Eagles are beating my team or whether my team can stop the play. I don't care. I don't like it. Get it the F off of my screen. That's my motivation. That's my emotional reaction to the tush push. That's why I want to get rid of it. The other stuff, okay, player safety and, the rules with assisting around. I don't care. I watch the games on my TV and I want that product to be the best thing possible. And this tush push really it lets a bunch of wet, smelly air out of the balloon. So that's where I come from on that. You don't have to agree. Just my 2 cents, but it's my show. Let's take a couple-minute break. Direct from the horse's mouth, the horse being Brian Gutekunst. We'll hear a couple comments about Jair, about the comments Josh Jacobs made, and about the tush push. I'm glad that's on Uncle Packer's mind. We'll get to that next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
talked about urgency. How do you, as a GM, approach the offseason when it comes to urgency? Where it's, you have to think about the draft, which might be guys that are 3-4 years down the line, and where there's veterans, what everybody, the outside the world, the fans want to see when it comes to urgency to go outside of guys. How do you kind of balance?
Yeah, our process won't change. I think it doesn't really change a lot as we approach free agency and the drafts as far as our, how we're looking at things. I do think that we have a lot of flexibility right now, not only through the draft, but in with our cap situation. So if the opportunities are there and the right players are there, we won't hesitate to be aggressive.
Brian Gutekunst earlier today, and the last 5 or 6 seconds of that clip, I get that's GM speak. If the right players are available for a price that makes sense for us, right, we're going to follow our protocol and we won't be hesitant to add elite difference-making player, blah, blah, blah. Right? Of course he's going to say that. But it's the beginning of that comment that has my interest and I think might have the interest of some Packers fans like Denny and Holman, who called in last segment, was very animated. Right? Packers fans who have seen this team be a bridesmaid many times over the last 15 years. They haven't been a bride, right? Forget winning a Super Bowl. You haven't even been back. And in not getting back to a Super Bowl, that kind of says, well, you're good in your conference, but there's always a team or two that are better because you haven't been able to break through. You get to the Super Bowl and lose, it's really difficult for me to criticize the GM and say you didn't do enough. And there were years, of course, I'm reasonable. I'm an owner. There were years where the Packers did enough. They were good enough in 14. They were good enough in 20. Right? But in a lot of those other years, it's like, that other team's just a little bit better than you. And to hear Goody say, our process doesn't change. I bet there are some Packers fans like, well, maybe it should just a bit. We're not asking you to completely abandon all your principles and to go off book, right? That 3-ring binder that Eric on 990 always references that's handed from Ron Wolf to Ted Thompson down to, right? And I think that's a fun way to think about the way that the Packers do business. I get it. You want to stick to your principles and your measurables and stuff, but at some point, you say, hey, maybe this is the offseason. We get a little more juice, a little bit more of a kick, especially when in your end of season press conference, you say something like, now is the time to compete for championships. And you kind of do it unprompted. Not kind of, you did. That wasn't prompted. That wasn't a prompted comment. So I think a lot of Packers fans are starting to look around and say, hey, it's hard to complain about the last 15 years of Packers football. We've had it as good or better than just about every team in football. Right? Especially when you throw out the Patriots because they're the outlier of outliers. But why are we always playing second fiddle, or why are we always a bridesmaid, never a bride to another team in our own conference? Maybe there is something to be examined and maybe something to be adjusted or something to be juiced up this offseason. I don't blame Packers fans for feeling that way. And that's why that comment, I look at it a little sideways. And I think that's reasonable. 608-321-1670. Duck and Holman says, what's wrong with a little tush push? For everyone who says, well, it's football at its core. It's man versus man, power on power. I don't care. I don't like watching it on my TV. It's very selfish, but I'm a fan. I'm a consumer of the sport. It is my cable subscriptions or my view that leads to advertising dollars, that leads to money for the league and TV rights, that pays the players, that keeps the thing going. Me and millions others like me. And I think it sucks on my TV. And I want to see them get rid of it. The safety or the rule, but that stuff's all secondary. And the football teams can deal with that. As a fan, my point of view is that play sucks. It's boring. I don't like it. Take it out of the game because I don't like watching it. Very selfish. I know. Another thing that jumped out, speaking of Brian Gutekunst's process, want to get home with 4. Pass rush needs to be better. And people talk about, well, maybe that's an area you attack in the draft or in free agency or via trade. And Goody came out and said, yeah, we like our guys and we expect big things, expecting a big leap, a quantum leap, you might even say, from Lucas Van Ness in his 3rd year coming up in 2025.
It was important for all our guys, including Lucas. I think, again, we talked a little bit about we need to affect the quarterback more in our front 4, which is 4 players, and Lucas is a big part of that. So he does everything he can. He's everything you want in a professional as far as his work ethic and what he puts into it, and I expect him to take a big jump this year.
So I am all for Brian Gutekunst and others in the Packers organization to expect internal development from the young players. Of course, feel the same way about the Brewers. You should feel good about your young guys. After all, you drafted them or you signed them or you've had them in your system. They're your guys. Of course, you should expect internal results. But this offseason, unlike the last few, is not an offseason where the Packers can just sit back and say, you know what? We got a lot of young talent. Let's just let it all play out on the field. And we'll see who pops. We'll see who's great. We'll see who continues to develop. They don't really have that luxury this offseason. Now, you hope that Lucas Van Ness gets it going, and I don't doubt that Brian Gutekunst believes in Lucas Van Ness because, after all, he drafted him in the top 15. But this is not an offseason where you can close your eyes and just count on internal development. You need some insurance, right? You need to have a plan B. You need to be able to supplement those young guys. Same at wide receiver. We've had this conversation a million times about wide receiver. This is not an offseason where you can just sat back and say, all right, we're going to wait for the young guys to figure it out. You can't wait anymore. You're in year 3 of the thing, and you've already proclaimed that this is when we start contending for Super Bowls, right? And if you're contending for Super Bowls, it can't be as simple as, well, we're going to sit back and see what the young guys do. Need a little bit more than that. 608-321-1670. Your thoughts on Brian Gutekunst and whatever else. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, it's Rick.
Hey, Rick. Rockin' Rick. Rockin' Rick. What's going on?
It's only going to take 30 seconds. I just want to wish you on the program happy 27th, so everybody knows it's your birthday today.
Thank you. Rick.
And the only other thing I want to say, if you talk to Mike again, tell him if he gets a chance to talk to Goody, and they're taking a collection for a U-Haul for Jair, I will donate.
You'll pitch in? Just a couple. I mean,
I'll
U-Hauls
pitch
aren't
in
that
for a
expensive.
U-Haul for Jair, yeah.
You'd be surprised. Anybody can rent a U-Haul, Rick, and it's not nearly as expensive as it probably should be. I mean, it's a big truck. You could just go drive up and grab one of those things, basically.
All right. So the main reason I want to call in was to tell you happy birthday. So you have a good one.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Rockin' Rick. Yeah, on Jair, let's get right into that. And I appreciate the birthday wishes. Thank you. And I'm giving myself a little bit of a birthday gift in hour number 2 of the show. I'll tell you about that after our next break. Getting a little selfish, but I think, well, I'll tell you about it coming up. Jair, here's a Q&A. This is with local media. So this is 2 questions. I believe the first question is, describe Jair's time with the Packers so far. And then I think the next question, and you should be able to hear it, but I just want to help communicate because sometimes this audio is a little muddled. I believe the first question is, describe Jair's time in Green Bay. And the second question is, has Jair talked to you about wanting to be back or wanting to go?
How would you describe Jair Alexander's time with the Packers in the years he's been there?
Well, obviously, he's been here a long time. He's been an elite player for a number of years. I think the past few years have been very frustrating for him, and certainly for us too, just because you want players like that on the field consistently, and when you can't be because of injuries, that's a tough thing on a player. I know he's doing everything he can to be out there, but I think the last few years haven't been where we wanted it to be, only because of injury. But obviously, very, very talented player.
Do you get the sense that Jair wants to stay with the Green Bay Packers?
Yeah, he's never said anything differently. And, I think he loves Green Bay. He's always got a lot of energy when he's in the building. I think he's still around, So, again, we'll work through that as we go through the offseason and see where that leads.
All right, so a little bit of information, nothing earth-shattering on Jair, but you're never going to get earth-shattering stuff when a general manager speaks with the media. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Mark.
Mark, what's going on, Mark? Welcome to the show.
Hi, first time caller.
Oh, I remember my first time. Well, welcome, Mark. It's happy to have you.
Yeah, I got an idea for the old tush push.
Okay.
Let's put the kicker and the punter and the backup quarterback in the back.
Behind the quarterback or in the back of the defense?
It's behind the quarterback.
To push.
Make them make their money.
You saying get a little more bang for your buck from the special teamers?
Exactly.
Interesting. So you're fine with the tush push? You don't want to see it go away?
I'm actually fine with it. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think if they implemented it with a little bit of smaller people, it might work out.
If the Packers implement it with smaller people.
Well, the whole NFL in general.
Interesting. I think the Eagles have been able to figure it out. So this is multifaceted, Mark, obviously. But the Eagles have an elite O-line, and they have a quarterback whose skill set and build lends really well to this thing. Josh Allen's, 6'7"? He's not built like that. Like, he struggles a little bit more. Jordan Love is so skinny. I think this is just an Eagles thing, and that's why probably Eagles fans are being defensive about it. I just don't like watching it. I think it's a dumb play. If I wanted to watch that, I'd watch rugby. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
I like the idea of making those special teamers earn their money. Mark, I might agree with you more. Appreciate the call. If the special teamers were actually performing on special teams too, but they got enough things to figure out. McManus did his job, but everyone else, it's like, you got to figure out the special teams thing first. All right, one more call, then we'll take a break. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant Clemhead.
Hey, Clemhead. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
I am excellent. I have a little bit of a gift to myself in hour number 2, a guest who hasn't been on the show in a long time. I'm excited to have. And we have Brian Gutekunst speaking. Anytime a high-ranking member of our organization speaks, right, that just gives me so much to talk about, gives us something to listen to.
Yeah, I wish you happy birthday earlier, but on the stream. But I wanted to wish you happy birthday too. But Rick beat me to it. I wanted to be first.
Rick called in and sang to me during Bill's show. I don't know, I hadn't heard from Rock and Rick, and I don't know the last time he called this show, but I'm glad to see that he follows along with such things.
Yeah. So I was just looking at a list of superstars like you that died at age 27. So just take care of yourself. There's Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, Alan Wilson of Canned Heat, Ron McKernan. I think he was in the Grateful Dead. So just be careful. Just take care of yourself. So anyway, the tush push. I remember in the Eagles and Commanders playoff game. Remember, like they kept jumping off sides, and that one guy kept jumping over the line of scrimmage.
It was so dumb. And then the refs, and then Hochul's kid is like, if this keeps up, I'm gonna just give Philly the touchdown. It's like, well, that's not how this should work. It's a clown car. I don't like it. Get rid of it. You don't have to agree. It's just my point of view.
I hate the tush push too. I think Washington's. I think the strategy was brilliant. I think they were trying to draw. I think they're trying to cause the Eagles to jump to false start with all the foolishness. I think if they keep this up, one of these times, Philly's got to jump. Or I think it was a brilliant strategy doing all that stupid, jumping over.
But then the refs neutered it, and they're like, knock it off. It's like, okay, this whole thing is a clown car. You can't just say, hey, don't do that, otherwise we'll just give them the touchdown. That was so dumb.
Over 100 years ago, in the early days of football, the first down was 5 yards. Every play was a tush push. They didn't have helmets in those days. Guys were dying on the field. It is kind of a dangerous play. So,
yeah, of course.
Let's stop it before somebody gets really hurt.
Look,
broken neck, something.
A dangerous play, Mike. I'm not opposed, and I appreciate the birthday wishes. Thank you. But if it's going to be dangerous, can it at least be exciting, right? If a wide receiver is going to get cracked, can at least it be a 25-yard screen where he catches it in stride and he's moving and it's a big play? I don't want to see guys get hurt in a play that's boring. You know what I mean? That's dumb. It's kind of like when baseball players get hurt. It's like, wait, you were swinging in the on-deck circuit, you get hurt. At least in football, when guys get hurt, it's normally like, oh my God, did you see that? The tush push is the most boring. It's just a rugby play. Get it out of here. I'm glad Mark Murphy's reasoning is very different than mine, or whoever with the Packers, right, petition the league to get rid of this thing. I just don't like watching it. And I'm a football fan. And us fans have the power. We are the consumer. We tune in. We buy the merch. We buy the stuff. And as a consumer, as a fan, I hate it. I don't like watching it. Let's take a 3-minute break. Coming up next, I'm going to tell you about a guest that we have coming up at 5:30. We'll continue to pick over comments from Brian Gutekunst. And I have a Brewers take for you as well after 5 o'clock.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, is just the fact that we need to affect the quarterback with 4. And how we do that will kind of remains to be seen. But we had good moments last year, but it just needs to be more consistent. It needs to be able to control the game, and we need to control the game and finish games off. And again, I'm excited about the guys we have in the room. We'll see if we add to it. But that's got to get better if we're going to accomplish our goals that we want to accomplish in this season.
It's more from Brian Gutekunst about the pass rush. A lot of belief, high expectation for Lucas Van Ness, which, further kind of confirms what we started to believe after their end-of-year pressers, and then once they fired Jason Rebervich, it's like, okay, so they really think there's something in there with this Van Ness guy. And by the way, they drafted him in the top 15. So I would be a little concerned, and I'd have more questions if Brian Gutekunst was like, yeah, it's not working for him. It's not clicking. He's no good. Okay, well, now I have questions about your process in drafting him. It would be like if you worked with a financial advisor and they're like, I want to take all of your savings and put it into this. And you're like, all right. And then after the first month, you talk with your financial advisor and he's like, we messed up. It's not good. It's like, wait. What do you mean? You had all this belief that this stock or this thing was going to hit. What a financial advisor should say is, hey, this is a good product, right? This is a good investment. It's going to take a little bit longer, right? It's taking a sec to get off the ground, right? That I can work with. I can work with Brian Gutekunst saying, we still have a lot of belief. We still have a lot of, this, that, the other thing. You put a top 15 pick into the guy. So I hope so. Coming up at 5:30, we're going to talk with one of my favorite coaches in the state of Wisconsin, head coach of the UW Stevens Point Pointers, Kent Dernbach. Used to be at UW Lacrosse, knows the WEAC very well, coached at George Mason when they had their run back in the day as a grad assistant. Very, very interesting basketball mind, really interesting to talk to. It's a bit of a gift to myself having him on. And if you were paying attention last night to the WEAC tournament, Stevens Point led by 26 at half, blew that lead in a matter of like 14 minutes, then came back to overcome Whitewater again, beat him at the buzzer. Insane game to get the WEAC tournament started. So we're going to talk that and basketball in the state of Wisconsin with Coach Dernbach in hour number 2. Let's talk more Packers next, a little bit of Brewers as well. Stick around, hour 2.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Badgers remain number 11 in the AP poll despite falling to Oregon in overtime on Saturday at the Kohl Center. With that loss, they will now need quite a bit of help to get their regular season Big Ten title as they sit in 4th place, 2 games back, with just 4 games to play. They'll be at home again tomorrow night against Washington before traveling to East Lansing to play the first-place Spartans on Sunday. Turning to the Bucks, who remained unbeaten since the All-Star break last night, beating the Heat at home 120-113. New additions Kyle Kuzma and Kevin Porter Jr., who the team calls Scoot, have helped bring some youth and athleticism to the team. Doc Rivers talks about what he's seen from the both of them.
I think Scoot scored a couple of times, then Kuz gets a rebound, breaks out, creates a basket, then Scoot goes back to it. Just gives us a lot of speed, and we try to make sure we have one roller, and that's Jericho, and 2 shooters around those guys, and I think it's a good fit.
They'll look to extend the winning streak to 5 in a row tomorrow night in Houston against the Rockets.
ABC of Wisconsin is the largest apprenticeship program in the state, with more than 2,000 active apprentices in 12 different skilled trades. In the ABC apprenticeship program, you earn while you learn on the job, get paid to go to class, and graduate with a job in your craft, but without the huge college debt. Explore 12 different construction trades in one spot at buildyourcareerwi.org or just search online for ABC of Wisconsin.
Well, spring training is in full swing for the Brewers as they played their third Cactus League game today. Also over the weekend, the team added to their outfield depth by signing both Manuel Margot and former Brewer Mark Canna to minor league deals. They will have the opportunity to compete for a bench role to open up the season after it was announced that Blake Perkins will miss around 2 months with a leg fracture. For the Wisconsin Sports Zone Network, I'm Austin Harper.
So how do you view your spot in the pack?
Well, that depends how you chop up the top teams, right, Bill? You kind of left a couple other ones out that we might have won. But we've talked about this before. Last year I was here and you guys were taught how we're going to catch the San Francisco 49ers. This year I'm sure it'll be the Eagles. It changes, right? And we got to concentrate on us and be the best we can be. I know that if with the group that we have now, we'll add to it. If we do that and we hold our standards high, then I think all those things, will be attainable for us. All the goals we have.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
A couple more comments from Goody that I think are worth picking over. Sports radio, and I used to listen to a lot of Cowherd, and I still listen to a little bit. And I would listen to like Nick Wright on Sirius XM when he would do Mad Dog, and I'd listen to more like national talkers, and I still do a little bit. But I find myself now more often over the last year or two listening to other local shows, right? Shows kind of like this one, even if they exist on a much bigger level. I told you during Super Bowl week, and I think I brought it up before, like Ben Kenny got me really into Felger and Maz, which is probably the biggest evening drive show in the country. They're in Boston, right? Or like anytime Ben would be guest hosting or doing anything on WIP in Philly, I'd check that out. Or 670 The Score a lot last summer, especially when Parkins was still there. Anytime something interesting would happen with the Cubs, I'd listen to that, right? I find myself listening to more local sports talk. And some of my favorite local, and I say local in air quotes because a lot of these they're local in focus, but they're national in distribution. A lot of these local shows, they'll fill an hour on, oh my God, the coach said this. Let's react to that. Let's take calls on that. And so much of sports radio, at least on the local level, the analogy that I think best use to summarize this is, the Kanye song Runaway. And I know Kanye is, I don't even think it's political to call him a Nazi. He says he's a Nazi now. So I understand that Kanye is problematic. Songs like what? When did Dark Twisted Fantasy come out? 2008? It's almost 20 years old. This is a long time ago. And it's a song, art from artist. I have never had an issue separating art from artist, and I never will. Not that I listen to Kanye a bunch, but this is just where my mind went. If you know the song Runaway, right? And especially if you watch music video, the first, 30, 40 seconds of the song is just one note on the piano. Bing, bing, bing. And then the rest of the song kind of builds around that. And then the music video, all these ballet dancers come in and it just grows from that one note. That's sports radio anytime, especially a general manager speaks. It's like, oh my God, did you hear that one soundbite? We are going to turn that molehill into an absolute mountain. This was the cut that I think best summarizes the state of the Packers. This is Bill Huber asking Brian Gutekunst about, how do you beat the Eagles? They're the team in front of you. How do you beat them?
How do you view your spot in the pack?
Well, that depends how you chop up the top teams, right, Bill? You kind of left a couple other ones out that we might have won. But we've talked about this before. Last year I was here and you guys were taught how we're going to catch the San Francisco 49ers. This year I'm sure it'll be the Eagles. It changes, right? And we got to concentrate on us and be the best we can be. I know that if with the group that we have now, we'll add to it. If we do that and we hold our standards high, then I think all those things, will be attainable for us. All the goals we have.
So that comment from Goody's like, well, last year he asked about the Niners. This year he asked about the Eagles. Yeah, because the Packers, without fail, over the last 15 years, have been the bridesmaid, not the bride. They've been right there, but there's always been a team in the NFC that's outclassed them. So, yeah. Sorry you're getting sick of answering these questions, Goody. Well, last year was the Niners. Well, yeah, last year the Niners beat you, and this year was the Eagles who would beat you. And next year, watch it be the Commanders or the Lions or the Vikings or whoever. The point is the Packers are in this 15-year-ish cycle of mostly getting outclassed by one or two other teams in the conference. And most Packers fans are starting to look at 1265 and be like, okay, you're really good at being really good. How are we going to be great? And that's why I think Max Crosby or Myles Garrett or, DJ Reed from the Jets? I think I might be combining DJ Reader and DJ Reed, but Reed, the corner, like Packers fans who ignored free agency forever and never would have considered the idea of first round picks being traded out for a player. But Packers fans this offseason are like, well, at some point they gotta do it. At some point they need to push a little bit harder. At some point they need to kind of take a swing for it, not go all in, but really get serious about this thing. I think that's the mindset of many Packers people in February 2025. And I think that dynamic was highlighted in that question and answer from Brian Gutekunst. So that's the big picture cut of the day. One more housekeeping cut, and then I actually want to talk about the Brewers for a couple of minutes here. And we have a guest coming up at 5:30. Coach Dernbach, head coach of the UW Stevens Point Pointers, won an unbelievable game last night. We talked about that, the WEAC tournament, right, for those who are fans of WEAC sports. And the reason why I bring up WEAC sports and the reason I reference it all the time is I think a lot of people in the state of Wisconsin, whether you live up north or you live in south, central, wherever, a lot of us went to these schools, or our parents went to these schools, or our significant other went to these schools, or our siblings went to we're all connected somehow, right? Or at least a lot of people in the state of Wisconsin are. So to be able to talk Wisconsin college basketball and the dynamics of basketball in central Wisconsin, one of my favorite coaches ever. I love talking to coaches at any level. So Coach Dernbach, UW Stevens Point, going to join us at the bottom of this hour at 5:30. But before we get there, I want to talk Brewers. And one last Goody cut. His thoughts on Josh Jacobs' comments at Radio Row, talk about how we need to get aggressive. We need a wide receiver number one.
Yeah, really what our players say in the media doesn't really affect our, the way we're going to go about things. I have a lot of private conversations with our players, and that's very important to me. How they feel towards our locker room and our team is important to me. But what happened, it doesn't really move the needle for me.
So this is a good political answer, right? Let's deal with it on that level first. If Goody says, you know what, Josh Jacobs is right, we do need a number one. Well, now you're showing your hand a little bit with certain players you might want to draft or players that you might want to acquire in a trade or in free agency or however, right? So you can't come out and say, well, yeah, he's right. You're also putting your own team on blast a little bit, even though I think it's accurate. If you come out and you say, well, Josh Jacobs, with all due, he doesn't, he's not in charge of building the team. You don't want to be dismissive. You don't want to publicly neuter who was one of your best players last season and one of the guys who's become a vocal spokesperson and a vocal leader in that locker room. So you don't want to come out and completely take his side. You don't want to come out and completely shoot him down. I think Goody walks this middle ground. And I think Goody and Josh Jacobs are hinting at the same thing. Like, we got a lot of nice talent. We need a couple game breakers. One on offense, and you need somebody to become that guy in defense. And maybe it turns out to be Edgerrin Cooper. But you probably need someone along that defensive line to play at a higher level and to become a game breaker. And Goody's talked about that until he's blue in the face, going all the way back to when the front four was a topic of discussion in both he and Matt LaFleur's end-of-season press conferences. So that was the other comment that jumped out to me today. In fact, I want to listen to that one more time just to make sure there's something.
Yeah, really what our players say in the media doesn't really affect our, the way we're going to go about things. I have a lot of private conversations with our players, and that's very important to me. How they feel towards our locker room and our team is important to me. But what happened, it doesn't really move the needle for me.
It doesn't move the needle for me when players start talking about moves. And I get that. If you have any thoughts on that or anything that Goody said, 608-321-1670, call or text. Coyote Mike says, Grant, happy birthday. Hey, how about this? Incoming CEO Ed Policy filed the NFL resolution to abolish the push play. Just a wild guess. P.S. Tell Austin he sounds great on the breaks. Yeah, good for Austin doing the sports updates this week because Ebo's in Costa Rica, so Zach's working earlier. It's a whole thing. A lot of behind the scenes action this week. It was fun to do the last hour with Zach and Kate this morning, though. I do like doing shows and doing things with Zach. He cracks me up. Aaron in Eau Claire says, is the brotherly shove in a legal formation? I might not hear if you respond to this, as I'm constantly in and out of the vehicle. Well, I can respond right now, so don't get out of the car, at least for 10 seconds. I always thought that there was a rule against like aiding and abetting the ball carrier. It's probably not called that. That's more of a legal term, but you can't assist the ball carrier. But I think the Eagles at some point were like, well, let's force them to call it, see if they do. And then they didn't. So once they go a game or two without it getting called, well, they can't all of a sudden start calling it. Makes the league look silly and inconsistent, right? So the league's not going to deal with that. And now it's turned into this whole thing that the Packers are trying to get rid of. I think I have a comment from that about Goody. Let me check, because I saved a couple of comments today. He spoke twice. He spoke with the national media and he spoke with the local media, and some of the same topics were broached twice. And I'm back here trying to keep it all organized and have it make sense. Goody on, where did this go? Because I know I saved it somewhere, and sorry to do this on air. If I had a producer, I could get up their butt and call them out on the air. Here it is. Brian Gutekunst on the submitting the proposal, I suppose, to ban the tush push. Here's our last cut from Goody.
Yeah, I'm aware of it. We really haven't had very many discussions about it. I'm sure we will over the next few weeks as we head into the owners' meetings. But so I'm aware that we did, but really haven't had many discussions about it.
That's really a non-answer. But covering all our bases, there's Brian Gutekunst. Can we talk about the Brewers a little bit? I watched some of their game, and it's in the bottom of the ninth. The Brewers are up 3-9. I was like, I don't think it's over quite yet. They're up 3-9. Oliver Dunn has been solid. Something worth talking about. Mizorowski pitched the first inning, and he needs to be in the zone a little bit more than he was. I also think that the ump gave him a small zone in what was his second or third hitter. Then a couple of walks got on, and then a jam job over to Jake Bauers that he probably handles like 6 or 7 times out of 10, and he didn't. So Miz's outing looks a little bit worse. And I'm not telling you that he was unbelievable, but I thought he got the short end of the stick with a small zone in one of the counts, and then he probably should have got out of the inning cleanly. Despite that, if Jake Bauers can just make a play, again, that he makes at first base most of the time. Very, very solid defensive first baseman, Jake Bauers, more so than Rhys Hoskins, although that hasn't stopped Murphy from playing Rhys Hoskins in the field and DHing Jake Bauers, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but we talked about that last year. So Mizorowski playing today, Churio and others in the lineup. It was a fun game to watch, at least for the first couple of innings. I kind of lose my appetite, and then I'm like, we got other things to talk about. But Caleb Durbin playing Oliver Dunn, playing yesterday and having some nice moments. These two games starting to run together. Infield depth has become a big topic of conversation on this show anytime the Brewers have come up, and I think that's partly my fault. It's mostly my fault. I'm the host. So I guess at the end of the day, it's all my fault. It all falls under my umbrella as the guy who's in charge of this show. But I think anytime the Brewers have come up the last week or two, the segment has at any point or at some point devolved into me complaining about why they couldn't spend $5 million on Yoan Moncada or someone else to come in and play the third base position. And I assume the Brewers considered all of those things. I bet they considered a ton of different players. But they plugged it into their computer and their numbers told them, well, we're going to get more. We're going to get better bang for our buck. We're going to get better value out of just playing the guys that we have, and we can save the $5 million. My response to that would be probably, but it's just $5 million. I know as someone who doesn't even sniff that kind of money, that kind of sounds insane, but for someone who runs a baseball team and has hundreds of millions. I know he's not Steve Cohen, but he has hundreds of millions. $5 million for a season of Yoan Moncada, or crazy idea. What about Hassan Kim coming off an injury? That's the type of player that the Brewers normally go to. Those are the two names I keep bringing up. Whatever. Those are the things that I keep talking about. I wonder, and I'm going to plant my flag here. I'm not going to go so far as to predict this, but this is something that's on my radar with the Brewers. I have asked around. I have checked in with some people. There are 2 players that I have been told the Brewers checked in on this offseason for trades. Infielders that they looked into, potential options at either short or third base. Infield depth, let's call it, right? I have been told that they made a call for McMahon in Colorado, who's a third baseman, and there was a fake burner account going around talking about that. So that's separate. I saw that on Twitter. I talked to someone else about this. The Brewers called, and basically Colorado was like, no, we're not even beginning this conversation, which is hilarious because of all teams that should want to offload a guy who makes $15 million a year, it should be the Rockies. But Rockies ownership is stupid. They're not cheap, but they're stupid. So that was a dead end, maybe for the best, because the Brewers probably don't want to pay that guy $15-16 million for the next 3 seasons anyways. But they called and inquired on McMahon. I also learned today, sending some texts, that they at least inquired and called about Alec Boehm in Philly, who I believe plays second for them, but probably has some versatility. And God forbid the Brewers just sign a guy who plays the position they need, right? Look at Travis Shaw, or Mike Moustakas, right? Those guys played out of position. So Alec Boehm, I think is a really attractive contract for the Brewers. Right, he's signed to a 1-year deal. They avoided arbitration. He's making just about $7.5 million this year. He will hit arbitration again next year before being an unrestricted free agent in 2021. So the Brewers would be on the hook for $7.5 this year and whatever he stands to make in arbitration in 2026. But you could always trade him after this season if he plays well and you don't want to pay him. Which I would, if he has a great season, that's a good problem to have. I would just prefer to pay him. But if you want to flip him after next year to a team that wants to take him on for his final year and was willing to pay him in arbitration, whatever he's worth, which could be a handsome amount as an arbitration 3 player, fine. But that didn't get very far anyways because the Phillies were probably like, no, we're a good team. He's a good player. We'll just pay him and keep him. But through conversations that I've had and people that I've talked to, the Brewers reached out to 2 players who are established and who are legit, McMahon in Colorado and Bohm in Philly. The fact that the Brewers have done this and shopped around and asked about acquiring players who don't make insignificant money. Like McMahon makes $15-16 a year. Alec Bohm is going to make $7 million this year, plus whatever he upgrades to an arbitration 3 in the final year of his deal in 2026. The Brewers were willing to shop around for legit options, and I could then assume, they were willing to take on the contracts as well. Just think about this, Brewers fans. I'm just telling you to put this in the back of your mind. I'm not predicting this. I'm not telling you that this is going to happen. I'm just saying stay woke, okay? Stay woke. That is a Childish Gambino lyric, by the way. That's not political commentary. Don't turn me off. Just ponder and consider and think about the Willy Adames trade in 2021. They got to late May, and realized this isn't good enough. This isn't going to cut the mustard. So we're going to go out and we're going to acquire, at a time of the year where trades really don't happen, we're going to go acquire Willy Adames, right? And I wonder, especially given the knowledge that the Brewers shopped around for established guys like McMahon and like Bohm this offseason, I wonder if we don't get into the year and Durbin and Dunn are playing at third base and Ortiz is at short, and it's fine, but I wonder if at some point the Brewers don't realize, look, I know we're thrifty and all, but this isn't good enough. Let's go make a deal. And then at that point, you're maybe shopping a player like Tyler Black. I think Tyler Black is the centerpiece of whatever deal they could possibly make this season. I don't know. He's they're playing him at first base. And don't get me wrong, like, you need a first baseman, but you don't really need one right now. He didn't impress at all in some extended opportunities in the majors last year. I'm not saying I'm out on Tyler Black, but I'm saying I wonder if the Brewers, given the knowledge that they shopped around and looked at some serious options this offseason, I wonder if they don't get a month, 2 months into the season, circle back to that idea about acquiring a player like that to come in and play the infield. And it's a legit baseball trade, right? It's not cash considerations. It's not, we'll give you a player to be named later in a lottery ticket for, a Caleb Durbin type, like a legit guy who plays every day, like Willy Adames did at the time. I wonder if they don't try to swing the 2025 version of the 2021 Willy Adames trade. It's just something that's been in my head, and it's going to be in there, especially as we get into the regular season, for a team that I don't think has enough depth in the infield. They might not have enough talent or depth. That's a bad conversation. That's a bad spot to be in. We might not be good enough, and we're not deep. Bad. 0 for 2. That's bad. So I'm just using 2021 as a framework. And I feel like a guy like Tyler, I don't know how other teams would value Tyler Black. I don't know. Depends on how other teams value the guy. I mean, whoever valued Asterio Ruiz enough to basically have it be the piece that swings the William Contreras trade, you just never know how other teams feel about your guys. But that's what I've been thinking about. File that away. Think about that more. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. In about 10 minutes, we are going to be joined by Kent Dernbach. He's the head coach, basketball coach, UW Stevens Point. Used to be at lacrosse, and UW Stevens Point and Whitewater played in a gem of a game last night. And I know Austin was watching too, intern Austin, who you can hear on the updates this week in the evening. With Ebo gone, he's been nice enough to help us out to do the 4 and the 5 o'clock update. And he was texting me, Austin, that's right. I forgot why I brought Austin up first. He was watching last night because Austin goes to Whitewater, follows his teams really closely. Whitewater trailed at the Quant in Stevens Point last night by 26 points at half. And then they come out of half on a 28-2 run, take the lead. And then Stevens Point wrestles the lead back. It was tied with like 4 seconds to go. Well, no, Stevens Point was up 3 with like 3 seconds to go. Whitewater, a mad scramble for a loose ball, rolls into the backcourt, gets a 3 in the corner to tie it with like 2 seconds left. Stevens Point calls the timeout, advances the ball, gets fouled, makes the one free throw, and then holds on to win. And that's the beginning of the WEAC tournament, right? And I like WEAC ball. I like Coach Dernbach a lot. It's my birthday. The interview is a gift to myself, but he's also really, really interesting. Talks about, right, the prestige and the value of basketball in the league, especially at Stevens Point, a place like that where the following is massive. And he also talks about Whitewater, Platteville, lacrosse, some of the other programs, and is just a really engaging and entertaining guest. I think coaches are some of the most interesting people because they view the world and they view the sport completely differently than we do. Sometimes in like an oddball, obsessive way, mostly in an oddball, obsessive way, because you have to be that way if you're going to be a coach. You're going to have to do it all the time as a job, right? Before we took that break, a couple final thoughts on the Brewers before we focus on basketball the rest of the show. I'm just trying to consider, and I'm trying to ponder a world in which they pull a similar trade in May or in June to the one that they pulled in 2021 when they acquired Willy Adames. Because I don't think this infield is good enough. I don't think they're talented enough. I don't think they hit enough. And they're not deep enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing, and this applies to starting pitching. And we talked about this going into the year last year when everyone's like, sign Trevor Bauer. Why don't they sign Trevor Bauer? Why don't they take a chance on Trevor Bauer? Well, A, he blows. B, they have like 10 guys, especially after bringing Wade Miley back, who ultimately got hurt, but like it's so many options, guys who were already there, plus a guy like DL Hall, a guy like Aaron Ashby, who's coming back from injury, right? Kind of newish additions in 2 different realms, right? They had a million arms. It was just about which one of them was going to stick or which ones were going. So it's one thing if you don't have a lot of top-end premier talent at any given position, that's fine as long as you got a big sample size, as long as you got a big pool of players, because some of them will hit. That's how sports work. This Brewers infield, it's a bad combination to me because I don't think their talent is that high offensively speaking, unless Joey Ortiz takes a huge step or unless Bryce Terang is more so the player that we saw in the first half of last year and not the player that we saw in his rookie year and the second half of his second year, right? So it depends. I just don't think that unit has a high enough ceiling and has enough pop offensively, and they're not deep. So it's not like they have three other options where it's like, well, this guy, that guy. And I know they brought in Mark Canha, but apparently they want him first, which is a little odd to me, given they have Reese Hoskins and Jake Bowers, who were both good for him last year. And Jake Bowers has had a nice spring. I mean, he's had a nice spring so far. I mean, it's February, so it's probably not even worth mentioning. But Jake Bowers had a 3-run blast today. Like, of all the places on the field that need a supplement, it's not first. You know what I mean? Get another shortstop. Get another third baseman. Get another second baseman. Bryce Terang takes a fastball off the pinky. He misses a month. They're porked. They got nothing. Then you're bringing in Sal Frelick, which is, okay, even if he can do it, well, now you're thinning your outfield when you want Yelich DHing and you want Garrett Mitchell staying healthy, which is its own battle that we've kind of forgotten about. So I don't think they're deep enough. I don't think they're talented enough. I think parts of their team are really good, and I think they'll win some games in a division that doesn't really have a juggernaut. But I'm just wondering, especially because I asked around over the last couple of days, it's like, so what did the Brewers, who did they call? Who did they call about? What did they actually do this offseason? Because Andrew Wagner on Bill's show last week was like, look, they called, they asked, they're in on everything. Okay, well, give me details. So I asked around. So they asked on McMahon in Colorado, and the Rockies were like, no, excuse me. We would like to continue to pay him $15 or $16 million per year, and we'll suck. Thank you very much. Have a good day. I don't get the Rockies. No one gets the Rockies, but that was met with zero interest or zero intrigue. They called about Alec Boehm in Philly, and Philly understandably was like, well, no, he's a good player. We're trying to win a World Series, and he only makes $7.5 million. He's an arbitration 2 player. He'll be arbitration 3 next year. So if the Brewers were to have acquired him this offseason, they're on the hook for 7.5, and then whatever he makes in his final year of arbitration, which could be significant, but the Brewers could always trade him after this year if they wanted to, recoup something for him and then ship that bill off to someone else, which would probably be smart. But they asked around, and they were at least this year willing to take on, pay totals or a yearly tab at least for a player like McMahon, $15 million, which is not nothing, or $7.5 million for a guy like Alec Boehm. The fact that they were willing to do that and engage in those talks and ask those questions tells me that while they're okay with this for now, they don't think this group is good enough, which is why when we get to mid-May, late May, early June, I'm going to start wondering, okay, where's Willy Adames 2.0? Not in that they're going to go acquire another shortstop, but where is a player that they really like, who they're willing to trade actual capital for to bring in and to round out this infield? Because in 2021, they realized early on, they're like, this isn't good enough. This isn't going to be good enough. RC is not good enough. We need to go get a legit option. In late May, too, which isn't a time window you see a lot of trades. So the Brewers have backed themselves into a corner a little bit in that the offseason is basically over. There's still guys out there, but, they're going to maybe have to rely on, if this infield progresses the way that I think it is, they're going to have to rely on another team somewhere with a legitimate option becoming available, which doesn't happen a whole lot. It's not very common. So that's kind of where my mind is with the Brewers. And I'm already bookmarking late May, looking around, wondering, okay, where's Willy Adames 2.0? What's the Willy Adames trade 2.0? And maybe it's for a guy like Boehm. That would surprise me because I don't think Dombrowski and the Phillies would have an appetite for such a thing. But maybe, you circle back with the Rockies. McMahon's a nice player, but he also makes a good amount of money, like $15 million a year. That's not anything to shake a stick at. I just would have signed Yohan Moncada for $5 million or Ha-Seong Kim for whatever he signed with, and I would have called it a day. But that's just me. I think the Brewers try to be perfect about everything, and to be fair with their budget and their situation, they need to be pretty close to perfect to continue winning and to continue contending year after year. So I get that. I $5 million is not very much money. And that really would have added a nice piece into your infield that I think desperately needs it. We can talk more about this next. We're also going to chat with coach, Kent Dernbach, UW Stevens Point, just a fascinating dude, a lot of high energy. He'll be on the live stream if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Used to be at Lacrosse Talks about basketball in the state of Wisconsin, especially in a time of year where college, high school, it's all starting to take off. I love this time of year, and we'll get the latest on his program, some other programs in the WEAC, programs that I know me a great deal, a lot of people, because these are the schools that a lot of us attended. So I like to bring them up, and I like to talk about it. And it's a little bit of a birthday present to myself because I like the guy, and I like talking WEAC hoops every once in a while. We'll do that next. We're back in just a couple minutes. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. I got 2 segments left. A little bit of a gift to myself here, this next segment. Although I think it's worthwhile. I know it's worthwhile. I have a good sense about these things. Not to pat myself on my rear end. We're going to be joined in just a minute by Kent Dernbach, who's the head basketball coach at UW Stevens Point. He's just kind of starting to wrap up his second year there. WIAC Conference Tournament started last night. Classic game between those two. So the tournament will continue, at least for Stevens Point, on Wednesday night. And they visit Platteville. Platteville, the number 1 school. UW La Crosse, the number 2. Some really good basketball in the WIAC. I just like talking with coaches. Coaches are some of the most interesting people. So even if it's about a league that maybe isn't front of mind for everybody, or even if it's not in a sport that's front of mind for me, you can always learn something interesting from coaches. Some of the most interesting people in the world. So I'm never going to pass up an opportunity to talk to one. And when I woke up this morning, it's like, well, the show's probably going to be 60% combine. I can probably do like 20% Brewers. What's the other 20% going to be? Well, the only sporting event that I actually watched last night was UW Stevens Point hosting UW Whitewater in round 1 of the WIAC tourney, and it was an unbelievable game. Whitewater was down 26 at halftime, and then they started the second half on a 28-2 or some ridiculous run. They came all the way back to take the lead, and then Stevens Point retakes the lead. The game was tied with just a couple seconds to go, and then Stevens Point ends up winning, so they advance. And I've known the Stevens Point coach, Dernbach, for a little bit because he was at La Crosse when I was doing media stuff there. So I would call some games and go to a lot of games. And I had him in a class once upon a time. And because I'm an ass kisser, right? So I shot him in the athletic department email today. It's like, hey, do you have 10 minutes to talk about last night? And we could talk a little bit about the WIAC and La Crosse and Platteville and some of these other schools who've had great seasons as well. And he was more than willing to accommodate, which I'm very appreciative of. So now here's our conversation. Without any further ado, this is a little bit of a gift to myself, but I'm not going to feel bad. Coach Kent Dernbach is here, someone that I got to, I say cover loosely, but I got to observe his success at UW La Crosse and work some games. And now he's back at his home in native Stevens Point, and they're in the WIAC tournament. Let's talk about last night, because you guys, I would have loved to be in the locker room after the game, because that had to be a unique situation. You guys had a 26-point lead. You give up a 28-2 run, and then you hold on to win. How does a Coach Dernbach team give up a 28-2 run? Explain that to me.
Well, we really just wanted to prepare for the moment of like how tough playoff basketball is, right? So like we really needed that. But well, it's more of a credit, I think, to like what Whitewater did to us and how tough that they are. And in terms of their starting 5, a kid named Carter Capstran from Franklin, right? He, as a freshman, he was a part of a Final Four team that started games in the Final Four and was a huge reason why they made that run. And in addition to that, they're just a proud program that they weren't going to go down. Now, for us, Grant, quite honestly, we were able to get them 2 times during the regular season, and both we shot the ball extremely well against them. So, we were able to get away from them a little bit. And then you do that for another half. And it's like, how do you keep that intensity level up? And it doesn't matter how much you talk about that in the locker room. Like, hey, guys, they're ready to get after it. And when it comes to somebody's career being done and their back is against the wall, we weren't ready for that. And it's more of a credit to what Coach Wish and Capstran and Vergas and all those guys were able to do. And then once the momentum starts going, you know how quickly it can be. Now, I'm really proud of how the guys responded to be able to come back. I mean, we were so bad that they took the lead with like 8 minutes to go in the game. So for us then to be able to respond and get it done on our home court is a heck of a statement, especially when we're playing about 9 guys. 7 of our top 9 are either freshmen or sophomores. So that was a nice deal to get it done on our home court.
Is it really difficult? It's something I pay attention to in basketball all the time. When a team shoots their way to a huge lead, that's probably not reflective of the matchup, and then the other team starts coming back. How difficult is it as a coach, or you've experienced this as a player too, where you have a huge lead and then you can kind of feel it slipping away and you get tight to regain control and to settle back in and to still win that game? That's a tough task. I think that says a lot about a team. I know you joked like we wanted to, feel that intensity, but I think it is a good test, right? To go through that. That says a lot about your guys.
It really, I mean, you have to go through the struggle, and people like, you want to get over the, this is more of a program talk, but you want to get over, right? You want to get over the hump, right? You want to be able to take that next step as a program. Well, you know me, the best way to do that is you have to go through pain. You have to go through experience to be able to get that done. And for us to have that experience and do it is just a really good lesson for us. But you said, like, we don't shoot the ball at 70%. And in fact, if you look at our stats out there, we're like 380th out of 406 teams in Division III in 3 points field goals made per game. So that's not our game. Right. We happened to shoot it really well against them and have a good flow for 5 halves of basketball. And then in the 6th half came and we tightened up. And again, once momentum goes, and you probably see this more in the NBA right now, Grant, like it's just all threes all the time. Like whoever's making threes, you can go on these incredible runs right now. And to a small extent, that's certainly what happened last night. But so much of that credit goes to Whitewater, their coaching staff and their players.
So I was watching you guys really early on in the season. You had a couple big wins, and you started 9-0. And I thought, here come the Pointers. And it's not like you guys had a bad season after that, but you never won more than 2 games in a row. And during your conference schedule, and that's got to be difficult because it feels like, guys, like you're chopping wood constantly. Like you never reach this state of cruise control. You know what I mean? It's 1 step forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So talk to me about your conference slate after getting off to like a perfect start and then really having to battle for a couple of weeks in the league.
Yeah. Well, that's our league, and you know that, Grant. But we had some really nice wins in non-conference play. We beat Trine and the number 1 team in the country, and it's when they were at their full strength, and then after that to go out and beat Christopher Newport, I think, who's only lost 1 game after us, and a 1-point game against Randolph-Macon, who's a top 3 team in the country now. So like that was really, really good stuff for us. But I like to say, like, the elevator, and we rose to 11th in the country then, and the elevator door opened up, and I think we like peaked out, and like we weren't supposed to be that high. We just weren't. And the reason for it is, Grant, is we didn't go through the process. It wasn't supposed to be, I don't want to say easy, but it wasn't supposed to be this quick. And not that I don't want it to be, not that our fans don't want it to be, but if it was, like, it wouldn't be realistic. Right now, out of the young men that are playing in our program, not one of them were here 2 years ago, right? We haven't even been together for 24 months yet. So the steps that we have taken in a very short period of time, that they have taken in a very short period of time, are significant. And now it's, how do you get to that next step? And it's these experiences that you had last night. It's the growing pains of going through this league. That's what gets you ready, right? Against the best teams. I mean, La Crosse and Platteville are both top 5 teams, top 3 teams. I mean, I would argue that they're the 2 best teams in the country, just in their depth and how well they're playing and everything else. Well, so you're gonna have some tough tests. Heck, we had Eau Claire, we play them. They start 3 graduate seniors. They won 4 of their 5 games down the stretch last year. We're rolling out younger guys that are 3 or 4 years younger. Like that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge. And I'm not trying to make excuses of it. It's just the reality behind that our league is the best. There's a reason why when no team has won more national titles than the WIAC, and why we're regarded so highly across the country, not only with our players, but programs and the history and the coaching staffs that are out there.
It's funny, you guys knock off some of the highest ranked D3 teams in the country in non-conference. It's like, okay, go play at the Sonatag on a Saturday afternoon. And it's, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean much, especially when you get into league play. And I want to ask you a little bit about UWL and Platteville, because those would be some of your opponents up next, will be some of your opponents up next in the conference tournament. But I remember when you went to Stevens Point, and I don't remember when or why we talked about this, but you mentioned something to me. You were like, that when Stevens Point is right, it's unique, right? You had this endorsement of when that program gets going, there's nothing like it. So I want to know where you are in that process through year number 2. You guys did a little bit better overall, about the same in conference play, which is probably more than anything a testament to what you were able to do in year 1. But where are you in that process, getting Stevens Point to that unique place?
Well, we have a really nice foundation in place. It's happened way earlier than I thought it was going to, right? This is a very proud program. I took over I would say arguably one of the best coaches in the country in Bob Semley, somebody that won 72% of his games, was part of 4 national championships. Like my mentor, right? Somebody that is a tremendous coach. And before that, you have Dick Bennett and Jack Bennett and Bob Parker, just four straight decades of success. But we won 5 games in 3 years combined in league play. Prior to our arrival here, right? Our coaching staff arrival here. And for those guys then to invest, for Josiah Butler, Seth Myron, Logan Baumgartner, right? For Cal Crone to invest and to come to something when it was at its lowest point, and now very quickly to rise up, like to finish 4th in the league last year, to advance to the semifinal game, to come back this year in a better thing. And we took everybody's best shot. That was the other thing. Like last year, Grant, like teams weren't, I don't think, taking us serious. So even though we had the same conference record, I just don't think teams were taking us as serious last year because here we're taking other team. This year we were taking teams' best shot because we were rising up on their radar. And that's the development of a program. But when I say this place is special, 950 fans on average a game this year, Grant. 950 fans. That means the Northland, who went 0-25 this year, that we played on Tuesday, the week of deer hunting, is in that. And we had 750 people here. And those are real numbers. We don't make that stuff up, right? Compared to like other games where you're at 1,300, right? To average close to 1,000 fans, over 1,000 fans in WIAC play, there just is no other place in the country that does that. There might be some other places that say they have that and out there, but they're just not being truthful with what their attendance numbers are. Here it's real, it's legitimate. Pointer basketball is something special, and that's why there's the support for it, but also that really fun pressure that comes with it, right? To be able to rise up and get where we all want to be, and that's competing for conference titles, and eventually competing consistently at the national level.
Yeah, it's like coaching the Eagles in that media market. It's the same thing. It's the WIAC version in Central Wisconsin. Is that more than just a point thing? Because I know you're an Allman Bancroft guy. Is that a whole Central Wisconsin thing that extends past Stevens Point, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just think like Spash is really well supported. Pacelli's really well supported. Yeah. A lot of those little smaller schools around here are really well supported. Here, we just kind of have that perfect blend. 60, 70,000 people where we're big enough to have a really nice following, but we're also not that big that there's another college in town and there's something else going on where like people follow Pointer athletics and there's this. I mean, our hockey teams get 1,600 fans. They sell out every single game. 1,600 fans every single home hockey game. Out there. So it's there, and for us to kind of just be taking these baby steps forward. And again, I mean, 18 and 8 certainly isn't a small step. That's some pretty good stuff. But for us to already get the fan base back and they're excited is pretty special. And it just, again, what makes Pointer men's basketball really unique.
So Platteville's next for you guys tomorrow night in the conference tournament. What makes that program so good, and what makes Jeff Gard so good?
Well, they have a tremendous staff, and they have tremendous players, and they've
got
been
a big
around.
staff. I always remembered that when they would come to lacrosse, it's like they would have a unit of assistant coaches, and they're vocal. All of them were vocal. Like that's a big staff.
Yeah, they get after it, but they return everybody from a team last year that was just 30 seconds away from making a Final Four and probably winning a national championship. Logan Pearson was the National Player of the Year last year, and now for him, he could have went to a number of Division I schools, decided to come back to Platteville. They've gotten so much better at the center spot, and they're just a complete team. There are no holes. They guard. They can play fast. They can play slow. They can crunch the glass, play inside and out. It's what you'd expect from the best team in our league, right? And then right behind that, you have lacrosse, who who is just really gelling, and they shoot the ball well. They share the ball well. I think they arguably have one of the best big men in the league in JJ Pater, who's just a junior for them, and how they play around him, and their coaching staff is doing a tremendous job there.
Well, I was going to ask you about Gritzmacher because I wasn't super familiar with him. I know he was a JUCO guy and came from was it Brian Stratton in West Dallas, but he had played at Whitewater. Like, he was familiar with the league. If you paid attention, I'm sure you followed because they're your league. But how much can you say about the job that he's done in succeeding you?
Yeah, he's done a tremendous job, and just getting them to buy in. That's the whole thing. Is there's talent there, right? I mean, there's some significant talent, and we knew that when we decided to make the move to Stevens Point. The special guys that are there with Sam Grieger from Randolph, and Dustin Rosu and Will. I mean, that was emotional stuff. But then at the end of the day, they have bought into what he's doing, and he's doing a tremendous job of just getting them to share the basketball, play the right way, and also guarding at a really nice level.
Yeah. Well, and I know that's what matters to you. I'm glad that they've maintained that in lacrosse since you departed for Stevens Point. I'm glad they're slapping the floor. Well, good luck tomorrow night, Coach. I appreciate it. And it's fun to talk WEAC basketball as well. Appreciate your time.
Hey, I appreciate it. Congrats again on all your success, Grant.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. Thanks, Coach Dernbach, for joining us. Just a couple minutes I like talking basketball. I like talking to coaches. He's one of my favorite people. And certainly having Dale on staff helps us in athletic departments as well. Now that he's a part of the show, Dale Jorgensen, Nakusa Register, now that we have him aboard, and we'll hear from him tomorrow. Right. The inroads with these WEAC schools in the athletic departments just run so deep. I mean, we are set. Dale has been such a weapon for this show already. All right, let's take a call. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, good evening. This is Tom from Egg Harbor.
What's going on, Tom? Thanks for listening to us up there.
Well, hey, I called you a few weeks ago, and there's this kid from Southern Door up here who he became the second leading scorer all time in boys that night. And he's going to be a Stevens pointer next year.
Oh, Dernbach knows. Okay, well, then I'll follow his career. If he's staying in the WEAC, then I'm all in. What's this kid's name again?
He's 23 points to get 3,000 in his career.
Holy cats.
And the fellow he passed for second place lives in Eau Claire, and he has called this Douse kid. He said, well, he's going to come and watch the games and actually talk to him person to person, so it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, number 1 and number 2, that it would be, right? Or number 2 and number 3 all time?
Right. No, 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Anthony Pieper is number 1.
Well, of course.
He's got almost 3,400 points, but there's 2 girls players that have 31 and 32.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure who they are, but Jolene Anderson just passed her last week one day, I think it was. But anyway, yeah, you'll be able to follow him. He's 6'1", point guard, shoots well, penetrates well, just really in control all the time.
Don't you love a player that's in control? All too often, these kids, they go flying down the paint, they're flying around. I like to see a basketball player who's in control.
Well, just keep your eye out for him. Drew Douse is the name. Yeah, he's special.
Drew Douse. Okay. Well, now I see it. It's on the Facebook page, Let's Go Door County. I appreciate you. Thanks again for the call up in Egg Harbor. I remember you calling Bill's show, and you're like, there's this guy who's about to pass the scoring record. Second in scoring all time at Egg Harbor. Yeah, Drew Douse. Interesting. And he's going to be a pointer. I like seeing all of these different WEAC schools. Obviously, lacrosse is number 1. Stout and Stevens Pointer probably my second and third, or my 2A and 2B. So that's just where my parents went. And especially with Dernbach, I like the guy a lot. Did a good job at lacrosse. And it's pretty cool to go back to the place where he started his career. He's an Almond Bancroft guy. So a cool story. And I want to see that program succeed as well. And with the buy-in and with all the resources of that program, it shouldn't be too hard. I'm excited to see what he does to finish out this year. They got Platteville tomorrow night. And then, going into year 3 and year 4, I think Platteville and lacrosse might just be the 2 best teams in the country. And if not 1, 2, maybe 2, 3, like these scores that we're discussing up in Egg Harbor. Drew Douse, of course. I'm going to post a podcast. It'll go up in just a couple minutes. Be back tomorrow for a WEAC Wednesday. We'll talk with Jesse Temple as well. Wisconsin, Washington tonight, senior night. We can react to that tomorrow as well, starting at 4.